To tell you what's coming up in terms of our preview. We're not going to get into the nuts and bolts of each match this weekend or specific matches over the course of the next couple of weeks. We're going to pick the 5 biggest storylines, and here they are on screen. Horan's Mayo 2.0, Kerry's new era, Galway, did they have a point to prove in 2019, Ulster's main threat, and GAA tickets and rules, the big one coming up at the end. We will start with Horan's Mayo 2.0. It's interesting just like reading some of the pieces around Horan over the past couple of weeks and months, and I think John Fogarty had the point on New Year's Day in the Irish Examiner that 12 of the starting team from that 2014 replay against Kerry are still involved in this squad. So it really is Horan's 2.0. It's a very similar squad to the one he left.
Yeah, and I suppose there's two questions with that. Is he comfortable with that? You know, is he comfortable with those types of players and the players that he obviously knows and he trusts them and everything else? It's an interesting thing about even just the Horan question. Like, I mean, did he feel that it was, could he have gone another year? Did he feel that it was, not that he was pushed, but that there was a kind of a groundswell that a change was needed? Did he listen to the players? I think he was a guy who was very, very in tune with the players, and even chatting to him from matches we did, you know, he was very, very deep in with the players. He was a kind of a guy, some managers I think take a step back from players and kind of say, listen, I'll lead from here, we'll delegate, and then you look at when some fellas are literally, they know what you have for breakfast, they know your girlfriend, your wife, they're sort of really into it. He strikes me as that type of a guy, and from what I know of him, you know, he used to spend so much time even talking to the lads, say 25 to 30 on the panel, even more so than the 1 to 15. So I'd say he intimately knows the guys then who've come into the panel or into the team over the last few years. I think it's a situation whereby the other question is the talent there? You know, have they actually got the talent in the county, you know, to kind of really make wholesale changes? And it's questionable. It's interesting to see that he has probably put 2 fellas in this weekend in the forward line, because, you know, he would have agreed over the last number of years that they have to unearth at least 1, if not 2 forwards to supplement what's there. And probably you're really pushing to 3 now, considering everything that's happened. We
can see it up on screen here. I presume you're talking about Brian Reap and Conor Diskin. Conor Diskin's first league start for Mayo.
Yeah, and like then the rest is all very samey, you know, like, I mean, it really is. Like, I mean, you've got, you know, and you've even got a few fellas who've just been kind of, you know, recirculated, like Vaughan in midfield, you know, stuff like this. Your half back line is pretty much the half back line of last year. You know, you've Higgins again in there. So it's, look, I think he realises, for a new manager, you don't want to go. You certainly don't want to be going in and getting tanking, you know, in the first few league games. You know, the league is massively important relative to the way it was, say, 5 or 10 years ago. It just is, from a preparatory point of view, from, you know, just your standing, from all the stats with regard to teams that do well in the championship, generally do well in the league, all that kind of stuff. So you have to have some semblance of form coming through it, albeit that you have to try to mix things in and try to unearth 1 or 2 guys, and really that's all you need. I think he's going to probably bring that personal touch back into it. Everyone knows the different rumours that were going on last year with Mayo, like who was really managing the team. There was certain influences coming in from players, all rumours and innuendo. But I think Horan would be a strong enough character, and I think the esteem that he's held, I think, within the panel, certainly was held, I think would be strong enough to win over those guys and to say, listen, we're going to do it this way and we're going to do it all together type thing. I think he has a really good shot this year, although you'd question, are they still, again, on the road too long? You know?
Well, that's the thing. It seems that every year it's kind of like a now or never situation with Mayo, and that's been the case for the last couple of years. They have had a longer layoff, though, from last summer. I wonder, is that going to help the likes of Andy Moore and get a bit more in the legs? But it does seem that...
Well, the last 3 All-Ireland finals that they've lost, or maybe even including the semi-final in 15, the replay, I remember distinctly standing in the press box when they'd lost an All-Ireland final and somebody saying to me, well, that's them finished. They definitely can't come back next year. And they always have. So until they don't, I don't think you can question that. But just on that team, like the couple of new players that are in it are in the inside forward line, and like Andy Moran's going to be in the inside forward line. Killian Connor's going to be in the inside forward line. So, like, you know,
Diarmuid O'Connor still to come back into, or he's playing midfield, sorry. He's going to push into the forwards, obviously.
Yeah, but like...
Once they Shamey O'Shea back.
Like, I think James Hornby, one of these managers that would look at it and say, look, here's where the team was. If everybody improves by 2%, that goes a long way to making us better. And like, Paddy Durcan had a brilliant year last year. Lee Keegan didn't, because he was just coming back after a really bad... Remember, he hurt his shoulder against Tyrone that day. Diarmuid O'Connor last year in the game against Kildare in Newbridge was absolutely exceptional. And O'Connor had struggled for a couple of years with injury after having a brilliant debut year and following year. So they're the guys actually, I think, who could make a big difference for Mayo this year. Like, but like, you know, you're still going to need one or two fellas to come along, because you have to ease the load on Andy Moore, and you have to, like, you can't play Keith Higgins in every single match. It's just not fair. So you're going to need a deeper squad. But I think the guys who are already there, if you can make them a more efficient team, I'd see Horan as kind of focusing more on that area, because he knows that they have. Like, they've so much experience of big games. They've beaten every team in the championship. A lot of these guys were on the 2011 or 2012 team that beat Dublin in the semi-final. Yeah. So they have that experience, even despite the fact that, you know, they haven't been able to beat Dublin in an All-Ireland final. So, like, if you know they can go toe-to-toe with Dublin on the biggest day, albeit they've failed to do the bit at the end where you win it, I think you'd be very reluctant not to pick them.
Is it harder to unearth scoring forwards? Is that just an issue around the country in GAA? Because you look at the new players that Mayo have brought in over the last couple of years, like your Eoin O'Donoghue's and your Stephen Cohen's and stuff like that, who I think have been very impressive. O'Donoghue in particular last year was brilliant at cornerback. Is it just harder to make it as a forward at the moment?
I think the problem for a scoring forward is obviously the whole concept now of forward play, you know, so it's even changed over the last number of years. You know, if you were a half forward or even a corner forward, you were expected to work like a dog, you know, so up and down the pitch. So then the onus really came on one or two guys, and they've had some good forwards in the last number of years. Like, O'Connor is as good as you get. Andy Moran was blowing the lights out. So you've had fellas who've been in and around, you know, getting all-stars every year. So you're trying to unearth not just a decent forward, you're trying to unearth a forward who could go and put his hand up for an all-star. That's what you're trying to unearth. That's a bit more difficult than just unearthing a fella who's going to get you maybe 5 or 6 scores a game with a couple of frees or whatever. Like that, everyone is trying to get that, but you're trying to get a guy who can come toe-to-toe with, you know, Philly McMahon or Johnny Cooper or whoever, or a packed defence, and really stand head and shoulders above everyone else. That's tricky, and it's also tricky from a perspective of, like, these lads coming in, they're not stupid, they're not in a bubble. They're going to know the pressure that's being applied upon them, even within the county and outside the county, that they have to be the next Andy Moran. That's a lot of pressure on fellas, because we've seen them come and go. You know, you've had different guys over the last number of years who've, you know, all of a sudden, you know, this is the guy really to take on the mantle, and it just hasn't happened for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I think, like, the one thing that I've, you know, from knowing James in the small way I do, and just speaking to him with regard to football, like, he is that type of fella who will give a guy confidence and who will bring him on. You know, he's not like I'm sure he is ruthless, but he's at the same time, he's very aware of the situation that fellas are coming into, and I think he will try to help guys on and pull the best out of them. And that's why I think you're right in saying that they were really running without 2 of their main players last year, you know, and Keegan was a massive loss.
They lost their midfield.
Was it, sorry?
They lost their midfield for Newbridge.
Yeah. And they have to, but to be fair, O'Connor's performance was absolutely, like, I mean, at one stage I saw him, I remember he was running and he got like a cramp in his calf muscles, and he was kind of hobbling along the side. Yeah, and he was still winning the ball. And I was kind of going, this lad, like, he was literally dragged off on the stretcher. You know, so he was a man. And I would have always, sorry, not that I questioned his. Just sometimes at half forward you'd see him a bit, and then you just see him kind of go out of it. You know, and remember, wasn't he sent off then against Galway? Wasn't he sent off against Galway? And I was kind of going, like, you know, he didn't seem like a very happy character in that camp. He didn't seem like a guy who was really enjoying his football until actually that game where he just absolutely emptied it.
I think it was kind of anger out of anything else. It was just that whatever he channeled that day in Galway into the wrong places, he channeled it into the right places in Newbridge. Unfortunately, he just couldn't pull them over the line. He almost did.
He almost did, yeah.
And speaking of like kind of an older panel and the ageing nature of that Mayo team, Kerry are quite the opposite at the moment. They've had a bit of a clear out over the winter. Conor, you do wonder if there's actually a bunch of young players who've won minor All-Irelands from the very start of the run that are actually ready to step up and fill the void.
Well, my only thing about this, and I know that Kerry, a lot of people in Kerry are saying and have been saying the last couple as well, it's a different thing having an All-Ireland minor winning team and having an All-Ireland senior and turning one into the other. But like, is it not better to have the All-Ireland winning? Like, if a county like, say, Roscommon or Cavan or Kildare, like a county on the sort of the fringes of the elite, if you want to put it that way, of the last few years, if they had 5 All-Ireland minor winning teams in a row, I think we'd be sitting here saying they're going to shake a leg here, like go for the All-Ireland. And Kerry are the county that's best set up to harness that talent, as in they won't lose very many of them to Australia. You know, football is valued in such a way in the county that they'll probably get good jobs. They've a brilliant club set up down there with lots of really good competitive games all year round. So like if anybody's going to harvest it, it has to be Kerry. And like they have more potential than any, clearly they've more potential than any other county in the country at the moment. Whether they achieve anything at senior level comes down to management now, which is why I think Peter Keane's a very interesting figure for this league, because like Eamon Fitzmaurice always said, like he was asked every year and he said, look, I pick the best team regardless of whether they're young players or whether they're older players. And I think it was the right thing to do in the context of each individual year. But if your medium-term goal was to build a new team, was to actually harness all the potential of these All-Ireland minor winning teams, at some stage the right thing would probably to have been to say, okay, I'm putting all these guys in, I'm going to give them a chance. If they underperform, they're going to get another chance, and then they're going to get another chance, and eventually they'll become a senior team. Because what Peter Keane has inherited is a brand new kind of fresh team, and other than David Clifford and Sean O'Shea last year, there weren't too many players to come through from.
And they're from the younger side of the 5 in a row. So like, are you worried about the progress of the start of the 5 in a row, the 2014, the class of 2014 and 15?
No, I'm not. I think it's all about how Keane positions the team and himself and the management team. Like, I mean, read a couple of different things about him. Interesting, how he dealt with the older players and that whole fallout, like some not getting calls and all this stuff. And he just kind of said, well, listen, they weren't my players. Yeah. So,
you buy that? Like, is that a fair enough thing to say?
Again, management is all about, I suppose, principles and making stands on certain things. So if he rings Donaghy, he rings Marr, he starts making phone calls around, explaining himself. He's already explaining himself. Whereas, he comes in and says, listen, I have a brand new clean slate. That's the way he's looking at it. He's not looking at what was on the slate last year, what potentially may be on the slate next year. He's literally looking at that slate. And I think he has to portray that image to the Kerry fans, who won't be too patient, right? They'll be demanding blood straight away, okay? They'll want All-Irelands and All-Ireland final appearances and everything else, where I think, not that he's going to come in and play the old youth card completely. You know, some fans, you have to give me at least 6 or 7 years to build this up. He's not going to get that time, but I think he can buy himself a period of time to do exactly as Conor says, to blood players, and then say, don't worry about it, didn't work for you today, we'll go again next time, we'll go again next time. If he can, it's a tricky thing to do, but if he can get that psyche change in Kerry amongst supporters, that they actually say, okay, this is 5 in a row, which potentially in a couple of years could end up being 5 in a row of the big one, well then it's worthwhile waiting this out for a year or two to let these guys develop.
Those couple of years have already passed, though, haven't they? Those crucial waiting years. It doesn't seem the patience has come.
No, because I think he still had Fitzmaurice had remnants too. I'm picking the best team. So the best team was then, whereas Keane can come in and say, listen, I am building for 2020, 2021. He doesn't have to actually specifically put a year on it, but he can say, this team has a massive role. This team maybe are underdeveloped with regard to X, Y, Z relative to the top 1 or 2 teams, but we are definitely knocking on the door. And I would expect them to be knocking on the door. From talent alone, they'll knock on the door. But I think if you can do that, but all the while quietly preparing them and getting them ready and getting the fire with them and saying, if they maybe got a trim him by Dublin, like, he'd just keep that lovely. He'd hold on to that for a few. That's what I would expect.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know the man, but from reading some sound bites and different stuff on him, I think he'd be smart enough to play that role. And he obviously knows the players inside out, which is a massive
If you go back to even when Pat Gilroy did this in 2010, Dublin played a league game down in Kerry, and it was the first time they won in Kerry since the 70s, and he fielded the defence with Mick Fitzsimons, James McCarthy, Kevin Nolan, Cian O'Sullivan, and at the time they were nobody like that. They didn't have any of the underage success. Now a few of them would win an under-21 All-Ireland that year, Rory O'Carroll, but he went with them in every single game, and he backed them in every single game regardless of how it went. And they had a couple of blowouts. They had the Meath one in 2010, but he just went with it and said, look, we're sticking with this, and they've gone on to backbone the defence that's won that many All-Irelands at senior level. And in terms of what they achieved at underage and probably ability at the same age as the Kerry lads are now, I don't think they would be at the same level.
No. I want to talk about Galway because it's a very interesting one for Galway because there is a sense of backing up what they did last year. I don't think many people give them the credit for what they achieved last year, but maybe the people not giving them the credit are actually right, that maybe they didn't deserve to be a top 4 team, as some people described them as. Is that too harsh a thing to say?
Well, I think their manager is a top 4 manager. I think he got absolutely everything out of them that he could possibly get out of them. I think they're a team that, more so than a lot of teams, I think they analyse the opposition and they decide, okay, we are going to play in this particular way to beat this style of opposition, right? So, you know, a lot of people said last year, oh, very, very negative and negative. I didn't actually truck with that because they were quite expansive when they needed to be. So yes, for certain games they decided, right, we're just locking this one down, like the Mayo game last year. But then, you know, if they smell blood, they were able to change things, alter things, put more fellas up top rather than having, say, just 1 or 2. I think they'll continue to do that. Have they the talent to go? I think what will happen is the surprise of Galway. Instead of teams now expecting Galway to analyse them, I think you're going to get a lot of teams who are now going to be really focusing in on them and saying, okay, here are a number of weak links that we can really go at. Now, I'm not saying teams didn't do that, but you know what I mean? They kind of, not that they came out of nowhere last year, but they brought a level, I think, of a certain completely different. His game changed massively from kind of 17 into 18. I think the style of play did, you know, and I think they caught a number of people kind of on the hop, and I think Mayo will up the game, so I think they'll have it a little bit more difficult. I still think they're up there top 6, top 8. Like, I mean, it's not that, that.
Like, the thing about it is, you saw with Galway taking the next step. Like they won Connacht last year. They beat Kildare and Newbridge. They beat Kerry and Croke Park. But they only lost to Dublin in All-Ireland semi-finals.
True.
So, like, the next level is a pretty big step, you know, and that's, you know, that'll be the big, like, people are going to start talking soon enough about Dublin and the 5 in a row. But, like, the question about Dublin isn't really a question, because we know from experience that Dublin will be of a certain level. That question is nearly a question about the contenders. Like, where will Mayo be? Where will Kerry be? Where will Galway be? Donegal, Tyrone, when you get to that part of the season. And that's, I think, the more interesting storyline over the next few weeks.
Big thing that he did do is he got this, which is massive for him, and I think it's even bigger than unearthing players or anything like that, is he got that idea that Galway are a soft touch at times.
That definitely changed last year. There's no question about that.
People didn't go, this is just going to be a shootout, you know, 2-12 to some. People went, okay, this is a dogfight. Yeah, and he has that now.
I don't expect that to change. It's just more with a potentially resurgent Kerry and Mayo. I do wonder if everybody's just going to bump down the pecking order a little bit, and to try and replicate that, what they did last year. This year is going to be a little bit tougher for them. I did want to ask, in terms of replicating last year, about Tyrone and just generally about the threat from Ulster, because I think Tyrone, Monaghan and Donegal are all in very interesting positions at the moment. Very briefly, who's the biggest threat to the All-Ireland this year, and in terms of surprising us, not even the All-Ireland, between those 3?
Well, it's hard to say that Tyrone could surprise you because they got to an All-Ireland final last year, but, like, it's interesting that Mickey Hart has brought back in Kyle Coney. Like, Kyle Coney did an interview with Will Slattery in the Irish Independent last year, and he was basically reflecting on the inter-county career that never happened, you know. And now he's back in the Tyrone squad, and we see Peter Canavan's young fella in it as well, and I think there'll probably be, like, Mickey Hart is nothing if not a pragmatist, and he'll have looked at the last couple of defeats to Dublin. Like, that's the only team that have beaten them the last couple of years in the All-Ireland series, and say, right, what can we do? And I think there might be a change of emphasis from Tyrone this year, in terms of how they use their forwards. Because, like, Darren McCurry is back this year as well. Apparently he was over in America during the summer, and he had a great season. But, like, being an inside forward for Tyrone for the last couple of years must have been the most lonely job in Gaelic football, because, like, people are saying Tyrone don't have inside forwards, they don't have good ones. It's very hard to know, because the ball that they're getting is very, very slow, and by the time they get it, they're surrounded by defenders. So I'd be interested to see what Mickey Hart does, because he is one of these managers who tactically thinks outside the box. He won't say, well, here's the template from last year, got us to a final, go with it again and try and improve and see can he get us over the line. He'd be well aware that Tyrone were nowhere near Dublin in the All-Ireland final last year, that it was a trimming to all intents and purposes. And I think we might see something slightly different out of them.
Right, that'll be interesting. One last thing before we get into predictions, Anthony, just a quick take on the new rules, because obviously the hand pass rule is gone. but the offensive mark still remains. And it's very interesting going through Ed O'Rourke's coaching column this week, saying about how this is going to potentially reform how teams attack, just in terms of successful attacks not needing runners off the shoulder, how inside forwards now at all costs have to be denied clean possession, so a lot of pressure on the kicker in the middle third. And then also, most interestingly, he says the profile of the ideal middle third player may change. For a team that builds their attacking plan around creating mark opportunities, the key architects have to become quality kickers in the middle. So no more big lumbering ball carriers. They've got to kick the ball as well.
Well, it's funny, I was just going to say that because, you know, that ties in with the Tyrone point. A lot of teams, and especially Tyrone, have a very, very mobile half-back line. So I don't know if they could hit a 30-yard pass or a 40-yard pass pinpoint accuracy, because we very rarely see it. Their first option is to go off the shoulder, take a pass, move into that space, and then either circulate the ball back out to a forward looping around, or just get up there. Very little of, you know, head up first and pinging passes. So I think he's exactly right. That is the way it's going to change. So there's going to be a focus much more so on half-back line midfielders and even full-backs having an ability that they can actually get up, take a pass, and then ping a pass into a forward line. Then you're going to have, I think, much more space obviously created inside. Will you have defences who say, listen, we're just going to make sure that we crowd out that space and we allow you get the ball and actually come again to a certain point, and then we just shut it down? Because the worst thing you could do is have 2-on-2 inside, lots of space, and fellas just winning easy passes. So yeah, it's going to be that's going to be the most interesting one. And I still think, and it's funny, you know, people talk about the rule change as if, like, I mean, from the referee's perspective, but it actually, as a player, you have an awful lot of players who, for the last number of years, say as half-backs, their only thing in their head has been to go as hard as they can, running with the ball, you know, take it off, give it, go again. Now they all of a sudden have to change their mindset into actually, you know, getting their head up, looking for a pass. And for a lot of them, it'll be actually alien. You know, for a lot of teams, it'll be alien. You know, you've had a lot of running teams. So it will be a slightly different, because, you know, even in the Tyrone game, there wasn't a whole pile. I think there was only maybe 1 or 2 offensive marks. You know, so that mindset and that even training. And I know from speaking to, you know, a couple of managers, I think they all expected that the hand pass thing would not fly, so they weren't even kind of nearly practicing it. But this has to now get much more emphasis, I would imagine, through the league.
Well, hopefully it brings some bit of a better spectacle as well. You do feel, though, that it might take a full league campaign for teams to actually figure out what they're doing, and then it'll actually affect the spectacle after that.
Well, are we going to go back to the old era of, you know, 3 6'4" forwards? You know, and just
be great to see.
I hope so. Let's move on to a couple of rapid-fire predictions, which we're definitely going to play back to you in April, Anthony. We'll presume that you're picking Dublin to win the league. Who do you think is getting relegated from Division 1?
I think the 2 that came up will struggle.
So you're going for Cavan and Roscommon here, to go back down. Division 2 then, is it a situation where the 2 went back down or going straight back up?
Go on, pick Meath, Moylesy.
Yeah. I think that is listen,
great division.
It is a great division. The big thing about that division and the big thing about the league is having 4 games at home is enormous. Like, I mean, you don't really kind of think about it. I'm telling you, like, from playing in it, you know, 4 away games.
Do Meath have 4 games at home?
Yes, Clare. Unfortunately for Clare and for Mana, they are the 2 teams who only have 3 games at home.
Right.
So you would see, you know, if the bookies were looking at it, they'd probably say, right, they're the 2 who are the outside bets or the inside bet to go down, and they have 4 away games. That's tough.
Yeah.
You know, it is tough. Like, regardless of even as a journey, because it's not like you go down on a Friday and you get relaxed. Like, you're generally going on that morning. You're up early. Look, I mean, it's just a change of routine. And if you're, you know, a lot of new players and different stuff, it's just not it's just not brilliant, you know, as a day.
So for Mana and Clare to go down, who's going up?
See, the Donegal thing, you would look at Donegal. Donegal's strong squad, but they'll need a strong squad. Obviously with club stuff and stuff going on with Guidor and everything else. So I think Armagh are an interesting prospect, as in, can they really kick on? I think McGeaney has really focused on this year, having a good strong start and pushing and causing a few upsets. I think Kildare, I thought with Kildare were very unlucky last year. But they've lost a few players who I think are vital for them as well, giving them a bit of an X factor. I would love to see Meath. I think Andy has obviously focused on getting out of the division. I think they have prepared well. They've lost a couple of players again, you know, fellas travelling and different stuff. I think Donegal will be in there, and
it's a tough league.
It is a tough league. I would love to say me. I think it's a big year for Andy. It's year 3 for him, and I think they've been thereabouts. You know, consistency has obviously been a problem in it. But I think the 4 games at home will help. It's a big one actually against Tipperary this weekend. That actually first league game could be a big tell. Tipperary were very unlucky last year.
We'll see if you revise your predictions after the first couple of weeks, when we'll have you on again.